it was a disaster. I was trying to manage 92 rental units by doing all the, everything from the showings to the leasing, the advertising, the collections, the painting, the cleaning, the maintenance, filing the evictions, all the stuff, all the banking, the accounting. It was just a disaster. So as a result, because I was trying to do it all, I did none of it very well.
All right, guys, here we go now. It is time to unlock more doors to deals. We're real estate investors here. We're real estate agents here, and we all have one thing in common. We believe that we can. We can live the life of our purpose. We can create financial freedom. We can build a better life for those that we love, and we can live the life of our dreams. I don't care if you're trying to do your first deal or your 500th this year. You can get to the next level, and we're here to help. Welcome to Doors to Deals. I'm your host and founder, Jim Manning. Today's episode can be found on doorstodeals.com/019, and I interview a friend of mine by the name of Mark Delfini. Mark runs a company called Landlord Coach, and he also has been in a mastermind with me for the past couple of years. He's one of the smartest guys that I know when it comes to rental properties and making sure that not only are you as a landlord buying properties right and figuring in all the expenses up front on what the true cost is of rental property when you buy it, and also at teaching people how to maximize the profits from rentals after you buy it and you own it. So excited to bring Mark to you today. Let's get started.
And we're here with Mark Delfini. Jim and Mark have spent a lot more time than I've gotten to spend with Mark. However, I got to spend enough time to know Mark and what he does. He's an extremely successful real estate investor. He's a member of a mastermind that we're a part of, and his specialty is landlord management or rentals. So I'm super excited because it's not one of my specialties. I'm really excited to learn from him today, kind of talk to him about some of his business. And let's get started. So Mark, before I start asking you questions, what do you want to get out of this call today? What do you want to share today? What's your number one thing?
Well, I'm humbled to have that you have me on here. For a second, I had to make sure you were talking about the same guy, that you wanted on here. But no, kidding aside, I think the one thing, if it was to be a true mark of success, because for a while I felt like that I wasn't really a success. Like people were talking about the successful guy and everything else. And yeah, if you want to put it on a resume, I suppose, by most measures of success, people would say, yeah, that's a really successful guy. But I never really felt that way, right? It was that head trash that we all carry around with us. And I guess I had to really start to embrace that, because if I was to look at the true measure of success that I would measure other people as successful, I have an awful lot of time to do what I want. I have an awful lot of time that I control my calendar, and I get to spend time with my sons. I get to have lunch with my wife damn near every day. I get to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them. And okay, so my life doesn't look like Grant Cardone, or my life doesn't look like, some other people who are wildly successful monetarily. But man, I have a lot of control over my calendar. And even though my bank account may not have 7 figures sitting in it, that's okay, because of the lifestyle. That's not the measure of success for me, for me personally. So I had, first and foremost, I had to stop comparing, and once I stopped doing that, it was really, really helpful for me to just say, hey, by my own measure of success, I am successful. As far as today, I want to be here in contribution to others. I want people to, grill me, ask me questions, peel back the layers, say, specifically, why do you feel this way? Because I would say I'm a contrarian in a lot of ways, just because I don't look at door count. I don't look at unit count as the measure of success. I look at life output. So from that side, I would really like to offer a different perspective. And maybe it's not the way, it just happens to be my way.
Awesome. So, and I'm so glad you said that, because I didn't know how much you wanted to share, how much you wanted to be vulnerable here today. And obviously we don't have a so much time that we can get into everything of your life, but I know that in spending the time with you and Jim spending the time with you that he has, I know that you've been extremely vulnerable and you've been extremely open, and that I appreciate that. I know we've learned from it, Jim and I have, and I mean, you just kind of shared a little bit about that, but I know your life has gone through a bit of a transformation in the last couple of years. So, I mean, if we can hit on that, I think it'd be really impactful.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you. I rejected that for a long time about allowing myself to be vulnerable to, just in general. I don't want to put my entire life out on YouTube, but, where people are watching me brush my teeth in the morning, but, but the other side is, I don't feel like I'm doing right by them by holding back, because my story is a compelling one back from when, back in 2008, in 2009, when I was working myself literally to death, and I literally did almost die in the hospital because of the lifestyle that I had put in place. It was a horrible business model, and I was working 20 to 22-hour days just trying to keep things, afloat. And then almost, getting double pneumonia, almost dying in the hospital. And then, to this rise, this meteoric rise. And hey, I really got things figured out. I was really doing well at that point after I kind of almost crashed and burned and literally, passed away. And then, as you plateau, and then you have other things that show up in your world. I had gotten married. I had 2 boys in my life all of a sudden. And then things crashed, with that, because I wasn't focusing on the right things, and my marriage struggled. And I mean, really struggled, like nuclear bad. Right. But, but when you refocus and you start focusing on the things that you really want your life to look like, that's when I really feel that's, when you stop comparing yourself to others, that's when you really start to get and head in the direction that you want to. So, for me, vulnerability, it's about leadership. And if I'm going to be a true leader, I can't not be leading from the front and, and not get shot at while I'm telling everybody else, yeah, you should go do that. You should go do that. I'm getting shot at just like everybody else.
So, you've gone into a little bit of your background. Elaborate a little bit more. So you got into the business when? You've had what success? Just give us some bullet points. Give us what you want on your background.
Yeah. So, a lot of my life is defined by my service to the Marines. And
thank you. We just celebrated Veterans Day.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And, that's important to me. That really does define me in a lot of ways, just because, going through the Marine basic training is not really the Marine Corps, but it's a hell of a start. But it really did define me in a lot of ways. And I served for 4 years, got out, went to Purdue, and I originally went there for hospitality, but decided that it really wasn't a good fit for me. But I went into the accounting program there at the business school. So I got out 4 years later with a degree in accounting, and I flirted with the idea for a good 7 to 8 seconds about going to graduate school. And I don't even think it was that long. It might have been less than that. But I just decided, the best teacher was really the work itself. And while I was in college, I had started buying rental properties while I was in. And
so you were how old at this point? When you bought your first rental property, you were?
So I was 25.
25. Excellent. Okay.
Right. So I was 25, bought my first rental property. And then by the time I graduated, I had about a little over $500,000 worth of real estate. So I had about a dozen rental units altogether. Most of them single family, but I had a few duplexes here and there. So, and that's really when the real education started.
Okay.
Because I proceeded to make every single mistake you can possibly make in the industry.
Okay.
And stepped on my wiener a lot, and sometimes a couple times because the first time wasn't sore enough. But after I figured out, I started making a lot of mistakes. And that's really where the true teacher was. People are like, man, the education is really expensive. I'm like, yes, it is. Yes, it really is.
Heck yeah.
And they think I'm talking about college. And I'm like, no. The education that I went through cost me millions. because I built up a portfolio, and I was still working at the time. I was still doing, buying rental properties and had a W-2 income.
Okay.
So, and I wasn't really living high on the hog. I mean, I was living, I would say, at my means, not above my means, but I was living at my means. The money that was coming in was going out, but I was living okay. But a lot of it was all driven towards growth. And eventually I left the corporate world. And my last job that I was at, I actually worked for the Marriott for a while, and that was a really, really good job, really good company. It just didn't suit me well because it was the field of accounting. It just didn't suit me very well. I ended up working for an accounting firm in Indianapolis, which was about an hour from where I live in Lafayette.
Okay.
And that was as a bank loan review person, basically as a banking consultant. So I really got to understand how the things worked in the banking world really, really well. Well, that job left me, and I'd never been let go from a job before. And I was like, wait, you're letting me go? And then I realized it was definitely a God thing. It was definitely, not to get weird religious on you, but it was one of those things where this other door could not open until this other door was shut. And I was hedging my bet for too long. They didn't.
And that's the door that you were opening?
The door of real estate, really, where
Okay.
I'm getting in full time. At that point, I had about 30 rental units, and I was kind of, playing both sides of the equation, where I had where I was working this salaried job. I was trying to handle my rentals. I refer to this as undertime, and undertime is when you're at work handling other affairs, right?
Yep.
I refer to that as undertime.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of this undertime, and they weren't down with that. It's one thing if you have to take a phone call, but if you don't bleed the company colors, they were quick to excise those sorts of people. So.
Okay, so from a timeline perspective, help me understand. You were 25 when you first bought that rental property.
Mm-hmm.
You're now how old, and you have 30, and you just lose your job?
So I was probably at that point. I'm thinking it was around 2006. So I was in my early 30s.
Okay, so you got to 30 pretty quickly, doing all this on the side,
right?
And now you're forced with, or the door opened of real estate investing for you. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So at that point I had 30, and I wasn't quite at the level where I could just quit and not work. But so I either had to grow, or I had to, find some other source of income or something.
Yep.
But what ended up happening is I got offered this opportunity, and I ended up picking up, just with, creative financing deals and, contract sales and things like that. I ended up getting up to 92 rental units. And
in what span of time?
By 2008.
Within 3 years, you tripled your rental portfolio.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. And then what happened? I
would love to say it was awesome.
Yeah. And then what happened?
Yeah, that sucked. Because what this phrase, and I've heard this, and maybe some of your students understand this too, is that I was growing broke. And
okay.
Because I was growing broke, I grew so fast and so rapidly, and I had very limited infrastructure of my, in terms of what I had to support all of this. I was still operating it, off my very sophisticated, your
cell phone. Yeah.
And, and at that time it was just,
probably a razor, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a flip phone. I had this office set up, which was basically I had a truck, and I had a trailer with a bunch of parts in it, covered trailer, and I had a laptop with a laptop stand, that sat in my truck. I had a printer in the back seat. I mean, it was a disaster. This was very, very limited infrastructure. And that's really where I saw a lot of my problem was, because I was trying to run this thing on very, very limited infrastructure. And when your infrastructure is poor, you have to beef it up with process, right? And that's what I talked about in the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0. When I wrote that book, I was talking about this infrastructure and process that you have to have, because when you have limited infrastructure, you have to beef it up with process. And most of the time, that process comes from a person, and that person is being worked to death, right? Which is coincidentally, what I see a lot of landlords going through is, a lot of time, especially if it's a husband and wife team, the husband's the acquisition guy, like they're going out and, they want to go kill something.
Yep.
And they hand their kill over to the wife, and say, hey, I killed this, now cook it and eat it for, so we can eat it. And, and she's dealing with the daily stuff. Right.
Yep.
Well, I didn't have a bride to hand this stuff over to. So I was killing and cooking. Right.
Yep.
And it was a disaster. So when I wrote about the VIP method, which is what I wrote about in the book, was the vision, infrastructure, process method. That infrastructure and process piece was just basically non-existent. I was the process.
Right.
So, it was a disaster. I was trying to manage 92 rental units by doing all the, everything from the showings to the leasing, the advertising, the collections, the painting, the cleaning, the maintenance, filing the evictions, all the stuff, all the banking, the accounting. It was just a disaster. So as a result, because I was trying to do it all, I did none of it very well.
Would it be safe to say that you were like most investors and you were trying to be cheap by managing it all?
Yeah, and what I didn't understand was the concept of opportunity cost. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, it's an economic term. The opportunity cost was basically, it's an actual cost. And even though you don't necessarily know this, and I wrote about this in the book, but there was this guy who was someone that I somewhat adopted as a mentor, and he saw me one particular morning, and I was looking a little bit more haggard than usual, and I wanted to impress the guy, right? So he's like, "So what's got you so haggard? What's got you so busy?" And I was like, "Well, I was out late last night, doing this thing. I was painting this apartment, getting it ready for this guy, and and this couple that was going to move in today. I was like, yeah, I guess it'll slow down at some point. I was doing the hustle, right? I was doing the hustle, that yep. hustle that we all talk about. That's addictive. It's it's like, oh man, look at him. He's really got a lot going on, right? That like it's like we wear that as a badge of honor. Like that's the thing you should be doing. You should be doing, you should be out hustling, right? And that's absolutely not what you should be doing. You should be, thinking about how you can get out of the hustle. And the guy said something to me that I never, ever forgot. And he said to me, it was an exchange for a while, and he's standing there and he had his cup of coffee, and he kind of spoke very deliberately. He would just sit there and he's like, oh, okay. He goes, let me ask you something. He goes, what kind of work is it that you're doing? And I said, I don't know. It was painting or something like that. Something not real high end.
Yep.
And he said, okay. He's like, well, what would you have to pay someone to do that painting for you? And I was like, I don't know at the time. And again, I was being a bit cheap, but also because I was so over leveraged in time and money and everything else, I just, didn't have the time to organize it and get a painter over there and all that other stuff. Right.
Yep.
So I said, I don't know, $10 or $12 an hour. And he goes, oh, okay. You realize that's what you're paying yourself, right? And I was like, now he knew enough to stop talking. And I imagine that I probably looked like the Hulk trying to turn back into David Banner at that moment in time, that weird contorting, like my brain was rewiring to this new paradigm. And I was like, oh my God, no wonder I am freaking broke.
Right.
And he said to me, when you're doing work that you can pay someone else to do cheaper, that's costing you, that's what you're paying yourself to do that job. And he said, let me ask you something. He says, if someone were to call you up, and at that time I had a side hustle going on just to kind of bring money in. And he said, you're doing work on the side for other people, right? And at that point in time, there's not much I can't fix. I'm a very handy with when I'm not a good construction person, but I can fix anything like washers, dryers, refrigerator, stoves, ovens, HVAC, all that stuff I can fix. I'm very.
I'll remember that next time you're in St. Louis.
Nope. So I do enjoy that work. I mean, kidding aside, I really enjoy that work. I like doing that stuff, right?
Yep.
So he says to me, he goes, okay, so how much do you charge to do that? At the time, I wasn't charging much, like $30 an hour. He said, I don't know, $30 an hour. He goes, okay. He goes, you realize when you're doing that low end work at $12 an hour, you're costing yourself $18 an hour. I was like, oh my gosh, right? At that point in time was when I realized that I was valuing my time so poorly because I was just the one doing it all.
Yeah.
So for those people who actually do have a job, it's pretty easy to value your time. You can say, okay, well, even if your salary, you amortize your time over, whatever, of course, whatever you're being paid salary, and you can figure out your hourly rate, $30, $40 an hour, something like that.
Right.
But when you're self-employed, right, and you're
How
not
do
a
you do
business
it?
owner.
Yeah. How do you do it?
Right. So you say, okay, well, what am I making? What could I be making? If I'm making this deal, if I made $10,000 on this wholesale deal and it took me, 40 hours to put that together, you can amortize that out, right? You can figure out what your hourly rate is. Unfortunately, your hourly rate will swing hugely back and forth.
Right.
But, as a coach, I know I'm worth several $100s an hour to people, right? But I'm not always busy, right? So there's times where I can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to use this time freedom, this time wealth that I have, and I'm going to use it for other stuff. I may go farming, to go find other, deals, or I may do some real estate stuff, whatever it is, but it's my choice.
Sure.
Right? So where it gets a little tricky is when you are truly self-employed and not a business owner. I'm making that distinction, but when you're truly self-employed and you're working for yourself as the sole person working, then you realize, okay, well, how am I going to value my time? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Did you get into this job? Did you get into this line of work to create a $12 or $15 an hour business for yourself, job for yourself?
So this brings up a question, and we're going to continue down the timeline. We're at 2008, so I'm not going to lose sight of that, but I want to kind of intermingle some questions that we had discussed before with this. What do you think is the one reason people fail, specifically at landlords, since that's your specialty? So what do you see in your coaching and your experience? Is it that, or is it something else?
Hey there, if you're looking to get the ultimate edge for your real estate investing company, go to doorstodeals.com/invest for more information. Just so you know, a high percentage of the people that we interview on this podcast are actually already Three Doors Network members. And our network members have a lot of extra resources. They have access to an online training vault with over 3 years worth of content in it. They have access to vendor savings like our Home Depot discount that's literally saved thousands of dollars for members. And we have a weekly group coaching call, and we have a lot of other great things as well as part of the Three Doors Network. So make sure that you check it out on doorstodeals.com/invest.
What do you think is the one reason people fail, specifically at landlords, since that's your specialty? So what do you see in your coaching and your experience? Is it that, or is it something else?
It's a combination of things, but usually what I see is they're over leveraged. They get in completely over leveraged. So as a result, they have no choice but to do the work themselves. Okay. Which I'm not telling you that leverage is bad. I'm telling you it's a good tool to get you in, but you need to get out as quick as possible, right? It's like, wow, those shoes look great on you. Yeah, they hurt my feet. Okay, well, you're only going to wear them for the wedding, right? You're not going to wear them every day, right? So it's that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's what leverage is like. The leverage debt, specifically debt, is a tool in your toolbox. Unfortunately, most people use it as a crutch, and then, when the first time you step on ice, you're going to fall down and break your face.
So I think that's a really distinguishing factor you just made, or comment you just made. Leverage can be time or treasure, money, right? Uh-huh. So you're saying that people have the combination of under leveraging their time and they're maybe over leveraging their asset, and that's a combination of the problem that you see.
Yeah. So if on a very loose perspective, cash flow comes from equity. Right. I'm not saying it's not a dollar for dollar thing. You say, okay, well, you get $30,000 in equity, you're going to get this much in return. It doesn't. There's a calculation there. It doesn't always work that way. But if you buy a $100,000 property, right, that's worth $150,000, right? There should be just, again, back of the napkin math, 1% rule. You're getting $50,000 in equity there that you're going to get cash flow from, right?
Yep.
So from that perspective, that's where that happens. Now you can get that equity position by putting in cash, or by putting in work, or by just going out and carving out a deal somehow, from someone that maybe is a distressed seller or something like that. But in some way, you need that equity. Now, if you're buying a $100,000 property and you're paying $100,000, I'm not saying that that's a bad deal. Just understand you're going to be trading. The only other thing that you have is either your cash or your time. And most of them, they're trading in their cash, or they're trading in their time because they don't have the cash.
Yep.
So the sucky thing about it for me was I'm good at a lot of stuff. Now, the problem is I just don't ever say no to stuff. I was like, hey, yeah, I can do that. Okay, can you or will you? Should you? And so go back to your initial question, a couple things is where I see them going wrong is if they're getting into it and they're not placing a value in their free time, that's probably one of the biggest things that I see is they're not placing a value in their time. Okay. The other thing is they don't understand multiple lines of complexity. So the multiple lines of complexity is where, when you're getting in, when you bring in a property, right? How much time is it really going to take to manage that one property, right? Because you're not just managing the property, you're managing your relationship with the resident,
Okay.
the relationship between the resident and the property, and then your relationship with the property. So you bring in one property, and now you've got 3 lines of complexity that you have to manage. One property, because you have a resident that you have to manage as well, right?
Right. No, it's awesome. So you're the expert on this. You've written, is it 2 books?
Well, I wrote 3 books.
3.
The first book was The Time Wealthy Investor. I rewrote The Time Wealthy Investor called The Time Wealthy Investor 2.0. So
okay.
If you haven't read the first one, you can skip the first one.
And go to 2.0, version 2.0.
Yeah, version 2.0, because the reason I rewrote that is because I was teaching these classes and I was teaching this VIP method, the infrastructure process paradigm, and nowhere in the book did I say VIP. So as people were like, well, where is this? I'm like, all right, I'll just make it match up. So
where I was going with that is you're the expert in this field. Like I say, you've written some books, you teach students on this. Have you developed some way to legitimately decipher those 3 complexities and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to buy this property and I'm going to self-manage it. By managing it, I know I'm going to spend X amount of time because of X, Y, and Z.
Right. So you do that with the VIP method. So, and this is just so I can maybe drive this point home a little bit further before we get into the VIP method a little bit.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of the 10Xers out there, saying
GC.
Right, exactly. And I'm not here to tear down Grant Cardone. I know he does not like single family dwellings. He does not like them, although ironically enough, that's how he started. And here's the problem that I have with that is that most people are confusing his vision for their vision.
Sure.
He's on a different path, right? Like I wouldn't want his life for a day for love or money. Like that's not what I want. I don't want my life like that. I really don't. I'm not just saying that because my life isn't like that. I don't want his lifestyle.
Right. But how long did it take you to figure that out?
Honestly, it was a fairly recent fairly recent epiphany that I had, where I was
within the last year or 2, right?
Yeah, because I was spending so much time comparing to what they had and what I thought I wanted, and I'm like, yeah, would it be cool to have it was funny, I was thinking about it. It'd be really cool to have a Lamborghini, and then I'm thinking about it I could literally never drive that here where I live, right? Because I don't want people to A, see it, and B, where the hell would I park it? I can't go anywhere. I couldn't park it at my mall, right? I'd literally have to have cones with me to drive it, park it, and then put cones around it so nobody would go screw with it or scratch it.
Or be that guy that parked, right in the middle of the the spot.
Right, and I walked 12 miles, right?
Yeah, right.
Like having a new car is just way too stressful. So I don't mind driving my, 07 beater until I'm completely out of debt. That's what I'm willing to give up right now, because I'm willing to give that up because I want to raise 2 good men.
Yep.
I'm going to raise 2 good men would maybe the death of me, but I'm going to raise 2 good men. Those are my sons.
Your sons, right?
And right now I'm spending the money. My wife and I have made the decision. We're living in not a super nice house. It's not a turd, but it's, not a super nice house, but we're living there because we don't want to buy something knowing that they're going to be out of school in the next 5-6 years. Yep. And then we like Lafayette, but we don't really know that we want to stay here.
Yep.
So we're like, okay, well, what's the point of getting planting super deep roots? But right now we're spending our extra money on sending them to a school, one of the best schools in the area, very highly academic. We want to make sure it's a faith-based school. Having a strong relationship with God is important to me and to us. So we're sending to a faith-based school. That's important to us, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's where we're spending our money. That's where we're investing our money. And any excess money, guess what? It's going towards debt reduction. it sure as hell isn't toward a $70,000 Ford F-250. Even though it'd be cool to drive, I'm like, no, that's not what I want. That's not my measure of success right now.
Right.
Right. So I say this, and it was funny because for a long time I was like, man, I don't look like those other guys on Facebook that are driving these boats and have houses that curve with the earth. Like I don't look like those guys, but that's the point, man. Like those guys are. I'm glad that they're living that level of success. But that's the thing where it's frustrating, because if you're comparing, you're just going to continue to be frustrated. But
right.
let me back up, because we're digressing here just a little bit. But
but that's good. It's a good point. Yeah.
Well, thanks. So the Grant Cardone guys, the one thing that I don't know if he ever addressed, because I don't really listen to him too much. I can only take so much GC. But his lessons are important. And one of the things that I learned is you can't learn from someone while you're busy resenting them. And so I had to kind of put my ego hat over here and go, okay, he's on a different path. It's okay. You can still learn from this guy, and he's got a lot to teach. But one of the things that I learned was, he likes the multifamily space, and so many people love the multifamily space. And I don't really know that they know why. They just know that he's in it, and that's where they think they need to be.
Yep.
But the problem with the multifamily space is you have so many more lines of complexity to manage, and they don't realize it. Because I just gave you, if you have one property and one resident, you have 3 lines of complexity, right? You have your relationship between the resident, the property, and then between the resident and the property. Okay. So you have to manage those lines of complexity, right? If you get 2 properties, right, now it's basically the same thing. Now you have 6, right? Because you have 2 properties, and now you have basically the same thing. If you have a duplex, the problem is now you have an interrelationship between the residents, because they left their garbage can out and they're making too much noise. And so now you have to manage that. Now you have to manage the interrelationship between the units, because let's say a leak develops in the wall that affects, from one unit affects the other, right? Or you have an interrelationship between, resident number 1 that's living in one side and unit number 2, because maybe they left the water running, or they've got roaches, and now from their behavior, it's impacting the unit over here. Yeah. Now you've got one duplex. Now you've got 5 nodes. You've got 10 lines of complexity that you have to deal with. And meanwhile, people are going, yeah, but you only have one roof. You only have, okay, one roof, like that, like you that's fine. I get that. But if that's the reason that you're going to multifamily, because it's one roof, there's way better reasons to get into multifamily, and that's not it. So so how do you manage these multiple lines of complexity? It's very simple. You use a system. A system will help you manage the lines of complexity. And the system is based on the VIP method that I talked about in the book. And if we can talk about that probably would be the natural transition.
Yeah, let's hear it. I mean, I'm intrigued. I have not actually heard you talk about this before, so let's hear it. Okay.
So the VIP method is really nothing. It's pretty simple. I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, I'm a Marine. I'm not that smart. I had to keep it simple. Right.
Well, and I'll disagree with you that I think simplicity is arguably harder to make good than a complex thing. Everything that's really great is simple.
Man, that's so true. Yeah. Well, thanks. So absolutely, I meant to do that.
Yeah. You're so smart because it's so simple.
Right. Well, that is not the case, but we'll just go with that. So,
sure.
So the vision infrastructure process method is somewhat simple, but it really does need to start with your vision. And I've gone back to this a couple different times, where the vision itself is so important to make sure that you have clear, because I really look at vision as your map. Okay. Yep. Well, a map is really only good if you know 2 things. Now, I was a navigator in the Marine Corps, and I spent an awful lot of time shooting celestial lines of position with a sextant, if you can imagine that. These are the days before GPS was really prolific in airplanes.
Wow.
So I'm taking, celestial shots of, from Aldebaran, whatever star happened to be in the, in the sky at one particular point, or Venus or Mars or the moon or whatever. But anyway, so I'm taking these lines of position. Well, a map is only good if you know 2 things. If you know where you are and you know where you're going.
Okay.
That's really pretty basic, right? Yep. So most people, they think that they're like, yeah, well, when I ask them, what's their vision, they're like, man, I want to own 30 rental units. And I'm like, man, no, you don't. Like, you really want to deal with 30 families, 30 toilets, 30 rent collection? I mean, is that really what you think? And they're like, man, no, well, but first, to start. And I'm like, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What's the life output that you're trying to accomplish? Now, surprisingly enough, this part of it is actually the most difficult for me to get people through, is the vision piece. Because they're like, yeah, I got vision. I know where I'm going. I know what I want to do. The infrastructure process piece is actually pretty simple. It's actually not that complex, but that's unfortunately where most people think that that's where the complexity lies. The complexity lies in this piece of real estate right up here. And the problem is, because people are not clear on what they want to accomplish, the life output goal. And as a result, they're chasing all these rabbits, so they end up chasing 2 rabbits and catching none. And these are the guys that from one moment to the next are like, hey, this week, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I got a wholesale deal I'm doing. And then the next week they're doing cryptocurrency. I'm like,
oh boy. Yeah.
What are you doing? Yeah.
So let me stop you real quick, because here's what I'd like to do. We have about 5, maybe 10 minutes left. Can we do this? Because I think it'd be really impactful. Can you share your vision, where it's at right now, and then how it relates to the VIP model, so that someone who's listening can actually get a real life example of how you're implementing it?
Yeah, that would be great. So I can do a piece of it, because the vision is,
vision's big, I get, but let's just say with regards to your rental portfolio, what you want for rentals and how that fits within the vision, so that just give a little 20-second overview.
Absolutely. So I have about 250 units altogether. Just that the ebbs and flows. I got people, and I manage, between what I manage and what I own, it's about 250 altogether. I work about 4 hours a week on that. Between, going and signing checks, and the girls say, what are you doing here? Don't touch anything. Don't screw anything up. And the rest of the time that I can use, I don't sit on my ass, because I really enjoy writing. I enjoy writing books. I enjoy, putting together videos. I enjoy coaching. Right now I've got a flip property that been working on, and I'll probably have that done in the next couple of weeks. And, but my point is, I'm choosing to do what I want to do with that time. I don't, my income generation, my life is not defined by my income generation. People will often say, hey, what is it that you do? And I'm like, well, I keep busy with lots of different things, but what do I do for money? And what I do as a person, they're 2 completely different things.
And I know your passion lies in speaking and coaching, because I know that just based off the time we've had together. Okay, real quick, from an income perspective, you already shared what your vision was about: raising 2 fine men, not boys, but turning them into fine men. Okay. So from an actual, and if you don't want to share that actual amount, but what does that look like for you from a dollars and cents perspective? And when you looked at your vision, how many deals or how many properties did you need to own and then manage to get there?
Yeah, because it actually wasn't that much. What I needed was actually, people are like, man, I really want to make $20,000 a month. I'm like, man, you can have a really good life with a lot less.
Yep.
Right. Because from my perspective, I only needed, because we're not really living real super high on that. What I needed to live that vision was about $4,800 a month.
That's not a lot.
It's not a lot. And everything else above that is gravy. And guess where it's going? Debt reduction. In about 18 months to 20 months, I'm going to be completely out of debt in my real estate. And then I'm just going to change my name to a symbol. And then you probably won't even know me.
Those 4 hours go down to 0.
Yeah, no, but kidding aside, but then I get to really ramp up things and doing what I want to do, because right now I have to trade my time to service that debt.
Yep.
Right. Because every time you trade yourself for that debt, you're trading more and more freedom away to someone else that's loaning money and making it work for them.
So your vision's time freedom and providing for your kids.
That's really it. Yeah, my vision, I really do want to have that time freedom to do whatever it is I want to do. And, right now, unfortunately, my mom is diminishing. She's got Alzheimer's. My mom is diminishing, and I want to spend as much time with her as I can.
That's awesome.
And that's important. And with my children, while they're good, and while I'm still reasonably healthy, I turned 47 last week, and I still, I'm still in really good health.
Hey, Scorpio.
Yeah. I don't want to save it all for the end. I don't want to save it all for okay, I'm 60 and now I get to retire and enjoy the good life. Well, man, I don't even know if I'm going to want to get out of bed at that point. I want to enjoy my life now as much as I possibly can, and have the freedom, have the white space on my calendar to enjoy as much as I can.
So we got the vision piece, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously not the full spectrum because
Right.
it's bigger than that. And we can't do it in the time that we have.
Right.
Help us then go to the implementation and process so that, someone can understand it again,
Sure.
how you've implemented it.
So let's say for argument's sake, we get it. We figure out where we're at. We figure out where we're going. Okay. So again, based on life output, not a unit count. So let's say, okay, fine. We want to make $12,000 a month to have this lifestyle that I want. I want to, okay, cool. You want a cool house? That's fine. I'm not going to tell you no. I mean, don't do that. Don't think that way. But because maybe you want that big house so you can entertain and you can have memories and really cool, whatever. Like that's fine.
So to interrupt you real quick, you're focused on the right reason, not the right thing when you're coaching.
Correct. Because when someone comes to me with a deal, they're going to say, hey, I got this really cool deal. I'm going to buy this warehouse. I'm going to like, all right, pump the brakes. Why are you doing that? Because if your vision was to go to, let's say your vision ultimately is to sit on a beach in Florida, and right now you're physically in Detroit, a waypoint along the way would be Indianapolis. If you happen to go to Billings, Montana, I'd be like, whoa, dude, what are you doing? Why are you in Billings, Montana? That's not even anywhere close to your vision. You're going the wrong way.
Right.
Literally and figuratively. So the reason why vision has to be so clear is so you don't become distracted by the minutia that will show up in your world. Okay. Yep. So the next piece being infrastructure, the infrastructure is just basically just the bones of your business. It's software. It's the property management software. It's the desks, the chairs, the laptops, the, whatever it is, that is the bones of the business. Right. So when you have the infrastructure in place, okay, when you're putting the process together, the process is just basically nothing more than how you do stuff, right? How you implement things, what's your policies on collecting rent and charging late fees and whatever else it is, right? So how you do things, right? So if you're looking at it again, going back to our map analogy, if you have a vision, the vision is just basically where you want to go. The infrastructure would be the train tracks. And then the process is the train that runs on those tracks that all stays in alignment with your vision for the future. So all that together is really how that works. But if you're not being really intentional on how you are, how you're putting your infrastructure together, then, let's say for argument's sake that your vision is to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year. If you're laying on the beach for 2 months out of the year in Spain and your infrastructure requires you to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, that's going to suck for you sitting on the beach with your laptop. I mean, like what kind of, how present are you going to be with that? Like that's going to suck for you.
Right.
So that's why I say vision has to be clear. So when you're putting your infrastructure in place, it stays in alignment with your vision for the future.
So then with regards to you've gone from, let's go back to 2008, now to 2018. You had, I think, a little bit of a fall. The 93 properties you were at, did you keep those? Did you lose them? And now you're at 250. So let's just talk about that last 10 years, if we could, to kind of surmise that success, because it took a little bit of a failure to get to where you're at now. And, even heck, over the course of the last year or two, you're still redefining yourself and making, growing, right? Because we're all always growing, hopefully, and understanding what we want.
And I don't think that's ever going to stop. I mean, it's not like that's not like, oh, success. I'm not going to change anymore. Like that doesn't happen. But what happened back in 08 and 09 is I got really sick. And life, backing up just a second, what ended up happening was things got really, really wonky for me for a while. People stopped paying, and I had $100,000 in the bank, and I burned through that in about 40 days. And so I worked from, instead of 16-hour days, I was working 20 and 22 and 24-hour days and sleeping at rentals, trying to get them painted and turned over and everything else. And I ended up getting double pneumonia. And with that double pneumonia, I almost died. That's when I almost died in the hospital. And it was during that time, everything was circling the bowl. My personal life was circling the bowl. Everything was just terrible. And I ended up losing about 2/3 of my portfolio. So I went from, I lost about $4.5 million worth of real estate in about 8 months. So, my $65,000 in revenues that I had coming in, that went to about $30,000 of revenue. And I couldn't keep up. I mean, it was a disaster. So once I kind of lost all the stuff that I lost, and again, it was like the worst thing in the world. I was embarrassed, my name's in the paper, for under foreclosures every other week. And it was just, just completely embarrassing. But at that point in time, I was like, you know what, screw it. It's already done. I'm going to learn from this. And once I started putting getting a really clear vision for what I was trying to accomplish, and then putting pieces of infrastructure in place, putting processes in place, so I didn't have to do all that low end, $8 and $10 an hour work. That's when things really started to hit for me. And I started to accumulate more properties. I started to pick up management properties and deleverage my cash flow. And that's when things really, really changed for me. So,
Excellent.
And it all started with a very, very clear vision of what I wanted to accomplish.
Awesome. And like you said, it's still, like we both said, it's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
We've got 2 minutes before we can open it up to some questions and see if anyone else has anything. Sure. We started this by saying that, what was your one thing you wanted to get across, kind of a different way of doing things? We've talked a little bit about landlords, but that hasn't been the focus. It's been a lot about vision, which I know we both share in that space. It's really big for us. It's really big for you. So to surmise everything, what would you like to leave everyone with? What's your final words?
Sure. I mean, if you want to, just to getting back to it, the funny thing is, we were talking about, I'm landlord coach, but at the end of the day, this VIP method works no matter what you're doing. It works whether you're in real estate or razor blades. You have to start with a vision. And it's really not so much about the minutia of what you're doing as a landlord. It's what you're doing as a business owner. It's that mind shift from self-employed individual to business owner, and then from business owner to investor. Yeah. And people, they want to just go automatically make the jump to investor. And it's like, man, you're not there yet. Like you've got to make that transition. Like, unless you're going to start just going out there and you've got $100,000 in cash and you can just start plunking down on properties here and there, $100,000 at a time. And getting and having all that cash flow. Now, most people can't do that. I would say nearly all people can't do that. So you have to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to manage this? How am I going to manage the process as a business? And I hear most people say, well, I'll just turn it over to a property manager. Well, they've got the same problems. And if anything, managing the lines of complexity, they've got it even worse, because think of how many people that not only they're managing properties and residents, they're also managing vendors and owners. So They've got multiple lines of complexity. When as a result, it ends up turning into something much worse, because they've got really, really lean infrastructure. So That's why I say in my aspect, again, I'm a property manager, so I'm just telling you, this is coming from me. I would say most people should be managing their own properties because they can manage it much, much more profitably and much closer to the best.
Guys, for this particular show, go to doorstodeals.com/019. You're going to find all sorts of useful information there, including a YouTube video replay, show notes, links to other great resources, you name it. So again, doorstodeals.com/019. Go out, live your purpose, and above all else, go after your dreams. Take care till next time. Thanks for tuning into this show. For more episodes and resources that will unlock Doors to Deals, check out our website, doorstodeals.com.